In ancient Mesopotamia, mankind's first known civilizations arose with unexpected suddenness, emerging not through millennia of gradual development but seemingly overnight, with sophisticated writing systems, legal codes, architectural marvels, and astronomical knowledge that would take thousands of years for other isolated human societies to independently discover. How did this happen? The orthodox historical narrative offers explanations of gradual development, innovations building upon innovations, knowledge accumulating like sedimentary layers, a tidy, linear progression. But what if there was a rupture in our timeline? What if the astronomical leap from cave paintings to cuneiform, from nomadic bands to walled cities with irrigated fields, wasn't entirely organic? The ancient Sumerians themselves had an answer. Their clay tablets speak of beings called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Gods, they called them. But perhaps they were something else entirely. I'm not here to convince you of any single interpretation. Instead, I invite you on a journey through mythology, archaeology, ancient texts, and modern theories, where we'll examine the Anunnaki phenomenon and the grand questions about human origins and our future in the universe that this journey will open to us. This is a story written in clay and stone, in the strange gaps of historical records, and perhaps even in our DNA. Before we begin this madness, allow me to present myself. I am Irevelato. I tear the veil apart and offer you the secrets you deserve to know and the question you should ask yourself on a silver platter. I am your student and torchbearer. I make these videos because modernity has suffocated our story for too long. Because it is our birthright to know and share, and I shall take that unapologetically and will work like a madman to reveal the lives and stories of luminaries and gods, the principles that govern our societies and our minds. This is philosophy with a hammer. If you've been following me for a while, thank you for being here with me. You know I love you. If you're new here, welcome to the depths. Subscribe to join our tribe of fearless seekers, activate the notifications to catch every video, share the torch with those ready to look at the sun, and please dare to share your thoughts because the video continues in the comments section. Oftentimes, one field of souls is better than one soul. And sooner or later you'll discover that we are billions of souls, searching for the same spirit which is right in front of us. You're here for a reason. Descendants of Plato, Nietzsche, Jung, and gods unnamed. See it, seize it, live a life that is spectacular with it. Because Francis Bacon was right. Knowledge is power. And I'd say your power increases exponentially if you act upon such powerful knowledge. But let's be done with the marketing and move on to a more serious business. The Anunnaki await us, so let's begin. The story begins with the unexpected discovery of a civilization that shouldn't have existed, at least not as early as it did. When 19th century archaeologists began excavating the Tells, artificial mounds of Mesopotamia, they expected to find the simple beginnings of human civilization. Instead, they uncovered something utterly perplexing. A sophisticated urban society that appeared with all the hallmarks of advanced development already in place. The Sumerians had complex irrigation systems, multi-story buildings, specialized crafts, astronomy that tracked celestial bodies with remarkable precision, mathematics including the 60-minute hour and 360-degree circle we still use today, and most importantly, cuneiform, one of humanity's first writing systems. But it's what those cuneiform tablets actually said that would truly shock the world. Thousands of clay tablets describe a race of powerful beings called the Anunnaki. According to these records, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, which the Sumerians described as having an extremely elongated orbit around our sun, taking approximately 3,600 Earth years to complete one cycle. The tablets tell us these beings came to Earth for one primary resource: gold. Not for wealth or decoration as we might assume, but apparently to repair their planet's failing atmosphere. The gold, pulverized into particles, would be dispersed into Nibiru's atmosphere to shield it from radiation. Let's consider this without immediate judgment. Is it mere mythology, or could it contain fragments of historical truth? The Sumerians, after all, were sophisticated astronomers and record keepers who distinguished carefully between their myths, legends, and historical chronicles. What's remarkable is how matter-of-factly these accounts are presented. The Sumerian king lists, for instance, record rulers who reportedly governed for tens of thousands of years before a great flood. Then afterward, more reasonable lifespans appear. The tablets tell us that when the mining operation became too laborious for the Anunnaki themselves, their chief scientist Enki and the medicine goddess Ninhursag created a new being by combining Anunnaki genetics with those of early hominids already present on Earth. After multiple attempts and failures, they succeeded in creating what the tablets call the Adamu, a worker race that could handle the mining operations. In essence, the Sumerian creation story describes genetic engineering. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not asking you to accept this as literal truth. Rather, I'm inviting you to consider how remarkably these ancient accounts align with certain scientific and spiritual and psychological puzzles we try to solve today. And in the next sections, this will become more apparent as the rabbit hole is deeper than the underground structures of the pyramids. The fossil record tells us that for millions of years, hominid evolution proceeded at an extremely slow pace. Small, incremental changes over vast stretches of time, exactly what we would expect from natural evolution. Approximately 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appears in the fossil record with a puzzling abruptness that continues to challenge evolutionary biologists. Our brain size increased dramatically over an extremely short evolutionary time frame. We developed complex language capabilities, abstract thinking, and creativity that far exceeded any survival necessities. This has been called the Great Leap Forward, or the Cognitive Revolution, and its sudden appearance remains one of paleoanthropology's most persistent mysteries. In 2005, researchers led by neurobiologist Bruce Lahn at the University of Chicago identified two genes involved in brain development that show strong signatures of recent positive selection. One appeared roughly 37,000 years ago, the other about 5,800 years ago, both extremely recent in evolutionary time. Even more intriguing, genetic studies of mitochondrial DNA suggest that all modern humans descend from a single female ancestor who lived approximately 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, our famous mitochondrial Eve. Am I suggesting that these scientific findings prove ancient alien genetic manipulation? Absolutely not. What I'm pointing out is that there are legitimate scientific mysteries surrounding human cognitive development, gaps in our understanding that allow space for multiple interpretations. The sudden emergence of Homo sapiens remains a subject of intense debate among scientists. Some point to the theory of punctuated equilibrium, the idea that evolution sometimes proceeds in rapid bursts rather than gradual change. Others suggest that certain mutations might have had outsized effects on cognitive development. In this context, Sumerian tablets provide an alternative narrative, one that was accepted as historical fact by one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated civilizations. There's another curious element to this puzzle. The Sumerians wrote extensively about a home planet of the Anunnaki that they called Nibiru. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure mythology, but in recent decades, astronomers have seriously considered the existence of what they call Planet X, or now Planet 9, a hypothetical large planet in the outer solar system with a highly eccentric orbit. Its existence would explain certain gravitational anomalies observed in the Kuiper Belt. To be clear, no definitive evidence has yet confirmed this planet's existence, and even if discovered, it would not validate the entire Anunnaki narrative. But it does raise interesting questions about how ancient Sumerians could have known about a distant planet that modern astronomy is only now beginning to consider. If we entertain, even momentarily, the possibility that an advanced civilization influenced early human development, we might expect to find evidence beyond Mesopotamia. And indeed, across the ancient world, there are provocative consistencies that have long puzzled historians. Massive megalithic structures appear on different continents, built with such precision that modern engineers still debate how they were constructed. From Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a sophisticated temple complex built around 10,000 BCE by people supposedly living as simple hunter-gatherers, to the precisely cut and fitted stones of Pumapunku in Bolivia, to the pyramids of Egypt and Central America. What's particularly striking isn't just the scale of these structures, but their astronomical alignments. Ancient sites from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics, often aligned with particular stars or solar events with remarkable precision. Even more curious are the mythological parallels. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia share strikingly similar stories of civilizing gods who came from the stars, of great floods that nearly ended humanity, of a golden age when gods and humans interacted directly. In Peru, the Inca spoke of the Viracochas, tall, bearded creators who emerged from Lake Titicaca after a devastating flood to restart civilization. In India, the Sanskrit epics describe the Vimanas, flying machines of the gods with capabilities resembling modern aircraft. In Egypt, hieroglyphs at Abydos appear to depict helicopters and submarines, though more conservative interpretations suggest these are merely the result of overlapping symbols from different time periods. However, once again, these parallels don't prove anything definitively. Cultural similarities can emerge independently, and humans everywhere observe the same sky. The human mind tends to create similar narratives to explain natural phenomena. But they do raise intriguing questions. Why did so many ancient cultures attribute their civilizational knowledge to beings who descended from the heavens? Why do megalithic structures around the world share such striking architectural and astronomical features despite having no known contact? The ancient texts themselves suggest an answer. The Sumerian tablets describe how the Anunnaki established various outposts and centers around the planet. Egyptian records speak of a time called Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods ruled Egypt directly before handing control to human pharaohs. Perhaps most interestingly, these various cultures all seem to identify the same celestial region as the home of their gods. The Dogon tribe of Mali has preserved knowledge about the Sirius star system that includes accurate information about Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye. The Sumerians, Egyptians, and numerous other ancient cultures also place special importance on Sirius. I'm not asking you to accept any particular conclusion about these connections. I'm simply pointing out that the story of ancient human civilization contains threads that, when viewed together, create patterns deserving of serious contemplation. The history of archaeology itself reveals something important about how we construct our understanding of the past. While mainstream archaeology has built a coherent narrative about human development, there exists a body of anomalous discoveries that don't fit neatly into this narrative. These findings, sometimes called Forbidden Archaeology, are typically dismissed, explained away, or simply ignored by the scientific establishment. Take, for example, the Baghdad Battery, a 2,000-year-old clay jar containing a copper cylinder and iron rod that, when filled with vinegar, produces electricity. What was its purpose? Why would ancient Mesopotamians need electrical current? Did they use it, and if yes, how? Or consider the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. Its sophistication suggests knowledge of celestial mechanics far beyond what we believed possible for that era. In Peru, the Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs only fully visible from high altitude, continue to puzzle researchers. Why would an ancient culture create enormous drawings only appreciable from a vantage point they supposedly couldn't achieve? The rigid categorization of such artifacts as either misunderstood conventional objects or definitive proof of ancient aliens misses the more nuanced possibility that human history might be far more complex, with periods of advanced knowledge followed by loss and rediscovery. Perhaps most telling is how archaeology as a discipline treats these anomalies. The careers of researchers who pursue unconventional explanations often suffer. Funding disappears, publication becomes difficult, This creates an environment where the safest professional path is to interpret all findings within the established framework. I'm not suggesting conspiracy, merely the natural human tendency toward confirmation bias and paradigmatic thinking that Thomas Kuhn identified in his work on scientific revolutions. Established theories resist replacement until the weight of anomalies becomes overwhelming. What if we're in precisely such a period now, where our understanding of human history is on the verge of a paradigm shift? How should we understand the Anunnaki narratives in our modern context? Perspectives range across a spectrum from the literal to the metaphorical, the physical to the spiritual. Some researchers, like Zecharia Sitchin, have interpreted the Sumerian tablets literally, arguing that the Anunnaki were indeed extraterrestrial beings who genetically engineered modern humans. His translations and conclusions have been criticized by mainstream scholars, but his work has sparked worldwide interest in re-examining ancient texts. Others, like Graham Hancock, suggest that the Anunnaki might represent the survivors of an advanced human civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age, their technology and knowledge so far beyond Neolithic humans that they were perceived as gods. Psychological interpretations, following Jung's concept of archetypes, see the Anunnaki as projections of our collective unconscious, symbolic representations of forces that shaped human development, externalized as deities. Some spiritual traditions identify the Anunnaki with interdimensional beings, entities existing in realms beyond our physical perception that occasionally intersect with our reality. What's perhaps most valuable isn't settling on any single interpretation, but recognizing how the Anunnaki narrative serves as a mirror, reflecting our own questions about human potential and origins. If we were influenced or created by more advanced beings, what does that mean for our understanding of ourselves? Does it diminish our accomplishments or contextualize them within a greater cosmic history? I believe there's something profoundly meaningful in these ancient accounts, regardless of their literal truth. They remind us that the question of our origins remains open and fascinating, that the neat, linear progression presented in textbooks might be far too simple to capture the true complexity of human history. They invite us to hold multiple possibilities in mind simultaneously, to entertain the wonder of what might have been, while continuing to seek evidence and understanding. If we are indeed the product of celestial intervention, whether literal or metaphorical, then perhaps our deepest intuitions about cosmic connection are the echo of an ancient truth encoded in the stuff we are made of. Consider the peculiar human obsession with recording, preserving, and transmitting knowledge. From the great library of Alexandria to the digital archives of today, we have consistently sought to create repositories of wisdom that transcend our individual lifetimes. The Sumerians themselves were possessed by this same drive. Their city of Nippur housed a vast library of clay tablets, a collection so precious that even conquering armies left it intact out of reverence. The Anunnaki, according to these texts, placed extraordinary importance on knowledge preservation. Enki, the Anunnaki scientist who allegedly helped create humanity, is repeatedly described as a keeper of the ME, cosmic decrees containing all knowledge necessary for civilization. In one famous myth, the goddess Inanna tricks Enki into giving her these ME, which she then brings to her city of Uruk, transforming it into a center of culture and learning. What's striking is how this pattern repeats across ancient cultures. The Egyptian god Thoth, keeper of all knowledge, was said to have hidden his wisdom in secret halls before the Great Flood. The Greek Hermes Trismegistus supposedly encoded cosmic knowledge in texts that would influence Western esoteric tradition for millennia. The Hindu Akashic records describe a cosmic library containing all knowledge past, present, and future. These myths represent a consistent human intuition that knowledge itself has cosmic origins, that wisdom descends from above rather than emerging solely through human invention. Is it possible that our ceaseless quest to preserve and transmit knowledge, from cuneiform to binary code, reflects something more fundamental than mere practicality? Could it be the echo of that original gift of consciousness? That moment when, as the Sumerians claimed, the essence of the gods was breathed into human form? What if the true Anunnaki legacy isn't found in megalithic structures or ancient artifacts, but in humanity's persistent drive toward self-knowledge, in our inexplicable compulsion to understand the cosmos? In this light, every library, every scientific discovery, every philosophical insight becomes the fulfillment of an ancient covenant, or the continuation of a project initiated when those who, from heaven to earth came, first kindled the flame of higher awareness in a species previously concerned only with survival. Whether literal or metaphorical, the Anunnaki narrative tells a profound truth, that the human mind itself is a cosmic library containing potentials and capacities that we have only begun to explore. The Sumerian king list begins with a phrase both simple and profound. When kingship descended from heaven. This extraordinary document, preserved on multiple clay tablets from different periods, records Sumerian rulers spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The earliest kings are described as reigning for impossible lifespans. Alulim for 28,800 years, Alalgar for 36,000 years. Mainstream historians typically dismiss these numbers as mythological exaggeration or symbolic values in a numerical system we don't fully understand. But what if we considered another possibility? What if these weren't human kings at all? The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki as incredibly long-lived beings. If we momentarily entertain their account as historical, these early kings would have been Anunnaki rulers governing early human settlements directly, their lifespans reflecting their non-human nature. More fascinating still is how the king list marks a dramatic transition. After the Great Flood, kingship descended from heaven once again, but the recorded reigns abruptly shift to more humanly possible durations. It's as if the document is recording a transfer of power, from direct Anunnaki rule to human governance under Anunnaki guidance. This pattern of cosmic beings establishing kingship appears across ancient cultures with remarkable consistency. In Egypt, the earliest dynastic period was preceded by the reign of gods and demigods. The Mahabharata describes ancient Indian kings of divine ancestry. The Chinese concept of the mandate of heaven explicitly connects royal authority to cosmic sanction. But what makes these accounts particularly interesting isn't just their similarity, but their specificity. They don't simply claim divine blessing for rulers, a universal tendency, but explicitly describe a transition period when governance shifted from divine to human hands. Consider how this narrative might illuminate one of history's most persistent puzzles. The simultaneous emergence of complex hierarchical societies across multiple regions around 3000 BCE. Conventional archaeology has struggled to explain why humanity, after hundreds of thousands of years of relatively egalitarian hunter-gatherer and early agricultural existence, suddenly organized itself into stratified kingdoms within a remarkably short time frame. The ancient texts offer a provocative answer. Kingship was not a human invention, but a cosmic inheritance, a governance structure implemented from above rather than emerging organically from below. I'm not suggesting we accept this narrative uncritically, but it offers a fabulous alternative way through which we can examine the emergence of complex hierarchy and its deep psychological roots in human consciousness. Perhaps most importantly, it raises profound questions about authority. If the concept of hierarchical governance originated with beings perceived as gods, what does this suggest about humanity's relationship with power structures throughout our history? Are the pyramid-like hierarchies that have dominated human civilization for the past 5,000 years truly innate to our nature? Or might they represent an inherited pattern, one that we've followed without fully questioning its origins or purpose? The Sumerian accounts of human creation contain a detail both startling and profound. According to these texts, the Anunnaki did not create humans from nothing, but modified existing hominids through what we would now call genetic engineering. The goddess Ninhursag, and the god Enki allegedly combined Anunnaki genetic material with that of early hominids to create a being with greater intelligence and capability, but deliberately limited compared to their creators. This story has an unsettling implication that human potential was intentionally constrained. Several Sumerian accounts describe how the gods feared humans gaining too much knowledge or power, including the famous parallel to the biblical Tree of Knowledge story. If we momentarily entertain this as more than myth, it raises some provocative questions about our potential. Could our DNA contain latent capabilities, dormant potentials that remain unexpressed? Might what we call junk DNA serve functions we haven't yet discovered? Modern genetic science offers some fascinating parallels to this ancient narrative. The Human Genome Project revealed that only about 1 to 2% of our DNA directly codes for proteins. The remaining 98 to 99% was initially dismissed as junk, evolutionary leftovers with no function. However, recent research suggests this non-coding DNA plays crucial regulatory roles. The ENCODE project has demonstrated that much of this junk DNA is biochemically active, controlling when, where, and how much of our genes are expressed. Even more intriguing are the endogenous retroviruses embedded in our genome. Viral sequences that inserted themselves into our DNA in the distant past and became permanent parts of our genetic heritage. These sequences make up approximately 8% of the human genome. Conventional science explains these as the result of ancient viral infections whose genetic material became integrated into our germline. But what does this say about horizontal gene transfer, the movement of genetic material between different species, as a factor in human evolution? Again, I'm not suggesting these findings validate the Anunnaki narrative, but they do demonstrate that our understanding of human genetics and its evolution continues to evolve in surprising ways. What if the most profound impact of any advanced intervention in human development wasn't the construction of megalithic structures or the founding of civilizations, but the alteration of our genetic code itself? If we were indeed genetically modified, whether by extraterrestrial beings, advanced prehistoric humans, or natural evolutionary processes we don't yet fully understand, what might that mean for our future potential? Are we still in the midst of this genetic unfoldment? Might consciousness itself be expanding as previously dormant capacities activate within our DNA? The Anunnaki narrative, viewed through this lens, becomes less about ancient history and more about future potential. A story not of our past limitations, but of our coming awakening. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of the Anunnaki accounts is not their description of human creation, but the complex dynamics among the Anunnaki themselves. The Sumerian texts describe not a unified pantheon, but a deeply divided family of cosmic beings with competing agendas for Earth and humanity. Enki and his half-brother Enlil represent the primary opposing forces in this cosmic drama. Enlil, commander of Earth mission and heir to the Anunnaki throne, viewed humans primarily as servants, tools to be used and controlled. When humanity became too numerous and noisy, it was Enlil who allegedly orchestrated the Great Flood to wipe them out. Enki, the scientist who helped create humans, consistently acted as humanity's protector. It was Enki who warned Ziusudra, the Sumerian Noah, about the coming flood, instructing him to build an ark and preserve both human and animal life. This fundamental schism extended to their offspring and followers, creating what the texts describe as an ongoing conflict that shaped much of early human history. What's remarkable about this account is its moral complexity. Unlike many religious traditions that present cosmic forces as simply good versus evil, the Sumerian texts describe competing perspectives among beings with different values and priorities. This cosmic conflict offers a fascinating lens through which to view one of history's most persistent patterns: the tension between authoritarian control and human freedom, between hierarchical power and democratic impulse. Could these ancient accounts be preserving in mythological form a very real conflict that shaped early human civilization? Might the opposing forces represented by Enlil and Enki have influenced the development of different cultural and governmental systems? When we examine the earliest civilizations, we find precisely this dichotomy. In some regions, rigid hierarchical systems emerged where god-kings wielded absolute power over masses of workers, systems bearing Enlil's philosophical imprint. In others, more collaborative models developed with councils, assemblies, and greater individual autonomy, reflecting Enki's more humanistic approach. This schism continues to be consistently present through human history, from ancient conflicts between empires and city-states to modern tensions between authoritarian and democratic ideologies. Perhaps most significantly, it suggests that the struggle for human freedom and dignity has cosmic roots, that our persistent drive toward greater autonomy and self-determination reflects not just social evolution, but the fulfillment of an ancient alliance with those among our celestial progenitors who valued human potential. Whether literal or metaphorical, the Anunnaki civil conflict is a beautiful story about the ongoing struggle between control and freedom, between power concentrated in the hands of few and power distributed among many, which we all know so well. In this light, every human rights movement, every democratic revolution, every artistic expression of human potential is and always was and always will be a part of an ancient cosmic drama, which is the continuing unfoldment of what began when, according to the Sumerian texts, certain gods chose to side with humanity's freedom against the control of their own kind. Among the most persistent questions surrounding ancient civilizations is their apparent technological sophistication, achievements that seem to exceed what should have been possible given their presumed level of development. The Egyptian pyramids remain perhaps the most famous example. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, many weighing several tons, stacked with such precision that you cannot fit a credit card between them. The entire structure is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees, a precision difficult to achieve even with modern equipment. Mainstream archaeology offers explanations involving ramps, levers, and vast numbers of workers, yet practical attempts to replicate these methods have consistently fallen short of explaining the level of precision achieved. This pattern repeats across ancient sites worldwide. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive stone blocks were cut with such precision that they fit together perfectly without mortar, some featuring complex interlocking shapes seemingly impossible to create with primitive tools. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer, contained gears manufactured with a level of precision not seen again until the 18th century. Ancient batteries, potentially electrically conductive gold artifacts, and descriptions of luminous stones all suggest technological knowledge that doesn't fit our understanding of linear human development. The Anunnaki narrative could be a context for these anomalies. If technologically advanced beings were present during human civilization's formative periods, these achievements become not mysteries, but archaeological evidence of their influence. The Sumerian texts themselves describe the Anunnaki possessing advanced technologies, including flying vehicles called mu that navigated using fiery stones. They mention tools that could cut and move massive stones, communication devices, and powerful weapons. Similar accounts appear across ancient cultures, from Vimanas in Sanskrit texts to the divine fire of Greek mythology. However, we shouldn't accept these accounts uncritically. Yet we should examine the technological anomalies that mainstream archaeology has struggled to explain. Perhaps most intriguing is how these ancient texts describe technology using the vocabulary available to pre-scientific cultures. When the Epic of Gilgamesh describes Enkidu witnessing birds with iron beaks that breathe fire, is this merely fantasy, or an attempt to describe aircraft using available concepts? Then, beyond physical technology, we might consider the technology of consciousness. The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki imparting methods of consciousness expansion, more precisely techniques, for accessing non-ordinary awareness that were after all the foundation of ancient mystery schools. From this perspective, practices like meditation, sacred geometry, and sound healing might be understood as sophisticated technologies of consciousness, tools passed down from an advanced civilization for working directly with awareness. Whether these accounts describe literal extraterrestrial technology or preserve fragments of an advanced prehistoric human civilization lost to cataclysm, they force us to reconsider the mainstream linear technological progression. What if the journey of human innovation is more cyclical than we have imagined? Throughout our exploration, we've examined the Anunnaki narrative as potential history, as mythology, as metaphor for evolutionary processes. But perhaps its deepest significance lies in a dimension we've only hinted at: its psychological and spiritual implications for humanity's self-understanding. Carl Jung suggested that myths serve as projections of the collective unconscious, symbolic expressions of psychological realities too profound for direct articulation. From this perspective, the Anunnaki narrative might be understood as humanity's attempt to comprehend its own extraordinary cognitive capacities. Consider the peculiarity of human consciousness. We are beings capable of abstract thought, symbolic language, art, and science, which are nonetheless qualities that far exceed the requirements of basic survival. We contemplate our own existence, we decipher the cosmos, and we imagine realities beyond what our senses perceive. What if the Anunnaki narrative, with its description of cosmic beings imparting consciousness to a lesser species, is humanity's attempt to make sense of the extraordinary cognitive leap that separates us from other earthly life? From another angle, the Anunnaki story might be understood as a cosmic mirror reflecting humanity's own potential. As above, so below. As below, so above. Ask yourself, if we imagined ourselves in the distant future, with mastery of genetic engineering, space travel, and longevity, would we not appear as gods to earlier versions of humanity? Of course we would. In this light, the Anunnaki becomes a prophetic story and vision of what we might become, a species capable of seeding consciousness throughout the universe, just as consciousness was once seeded on Earth. This interpretation aligns with certain spiritual traditions that view human consciousness as simultaneously incarnate and cosmic, a fragment of universal awareness experiencing itself through individual form. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, suggests that cosmic patterns repeat at all scales of existence. If this principle holds true, then perhaps the Anunnaki narrative describes not just external beings, but aspects of our own multidimensional nature, the cosmic self that exists beyond physical limitation, spirit with its souls, periodically manifesting in material form to evolve consciousness through direct experience. What if the gods who came from heaven are actually future versions of ourselves, advanced beings reaching backward through time to influence their own evolutionary journey? Certain interpretations of quantum physics suggest that consciousness is non-local, potentially capable of such temporal recursion. Or perhaps the Anunnaki represent not literal beings, but symbolic archetypes of consciousness, the eternal principles that govern cosmic unfoldment from both the inner and the outer constellations, personified by ancient cultures as gods with distinct personalities and agendas. Whether we interpret the Anunnaki narrative literally or symbolically, it offers you a profound gift: the recognition that we are more than terrestrial beings, and that our consciousness, our potential, and our ultimate destiny are cosmic in nature. The most valuable aspect of the Anunnaki story may be neither historical validation nor factual debunking, but the expansion of possibility it offers to human self-understanding, the recognition that we are indeed and have always been children of the stars. Few institutions in human history have maintained continuity and power as effectively as the Vatican. For nearly 2 millennia, it has stood as both a religious authority and a repository of knowledge spanning civilizations and eras. What makes the Vatican particularly intriguing in our exploration is not merely its longevity, but its carefully guarded archives, collections so vast and restricted that they have become the subject of speculation for centuries. The Vatican's secret archives, recently renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archives, contain over 53 miles of shelving with documents dating back to the 8th century. Only qualified scholars may access these archives, and even then, access is highly regulated and restricted. Certain collections remain entirely closed to outside researchers. What might these restricted archives contain? The Vatican's own history provides intriguing context. When Rome transitioned from a pagan empire to a Christian one, it didn't simply replace existing power structures, it absorbed and transformed them. The early church, seeking to establish authority across diverse regions, frequently incorporated elements of pre-existing belief systems while recontextualizing their meaning. This process wasn't limited to Europe. As Christianity spread, it encountered and absorbed aspects of ancient knowledge systems worldwide, from Egyptian mystery traditions to Mesopotamian cosmologies. The Sumerian records themselves present a fascinating possibility. According to these texts, the Anunnaki established multiple centers of knowledge across the ancient world, repositories of science, cosmology, and history that formed the foundation of early civilizations. If such repositories existed, the early church, with its imperial backing and systematic approach to knowledge acquisition, would have been uniquely positioned to gather and centralize these scattered fragments of ancient wisdom. Consider the curious case of Father Carlo Crespi, a Catholic priest who spent decades in Ecuador during the early 20th century. Father Crespi amassed an extraordinary collection of artifacts given to him by indigenous people from the region, objects that included metalwork with peculiar symbols resembling Sumerian and Middle Eastern writing. After his death in 1982, much of Crespi's collection disappeared. Some claim it was transferred to Vatican Vaults, though official sources dispute this. What remains of his collection shows workmanship that seems incongruous with conventional understanding of pre-Columbian South American technology. Even more intriguing are persistent rumors about restricted sections within the Vatican Library containing ancient Sumerian texts, not copies but original tablets brought to Rome during its imperial expansion. While these claims remain unverified, they align with documented historical patterns. The Roman Empire systematically gathered knowledge from conquered territories, and the later Catholic Church continued this practice of knowledge acquisition and centralization. I'm not suggesting a simplistic conspiracy theory about Vatican suppression of truth. The reality is likely far more nuanced and interesting, and it involves complex theological, political, and historical factors spanning centuries. What's particularly fascinating is the possibility that the Vatican may house fragments of ancient knowledge whose full significance remains unrealized even by the institution itself. Texts and artifacts catalogued and preserved through centuries of upheaval, their deeper connections to human origins not yet fully recognized. If there is indeed an unbroken thread of knowledge extending back to humanity's earliest civilizations, the Vatican is one of the few institutions with the continuity and resources to have maintained it. Whether such knowledge remains locked in restricted archives, hidden in plain sight through symbolic reinterpretation, or lost even to the Vatican itself, remains one of history's most important questions. When we examine how mainstream institutions interact with evidence challenging conventional historical narratives, few cases are as provocative as what some researchers have called the Smithsonian Enigma. Founded in 1846, the Smithsonian Institution quickly became America's preeminent scientific authority, the arbiter of what constitutes legitimate archaeological and anthropological knowledge in North America. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers across America reported numerous discoveries that seemed to challenge conventional understanding of pre-Columbian history. Unusually large human skeletons, though not giant by fictional standards, unusual artifacts, and structures that some interpreted as evidence of pre-Columbian contact. Many of these were either misidentifications, hoaxes, or sensationalized newspaper accounts. In some of these accounts, discoveries were reportedly transferred to the Smithsonian for analysis, after which many were properly catalogued, studied, and some remain in collections today, though they did not revolutionize our understanding of history as the newspaper accounts sometimes suggested. The conventional explanation is straightforward. These were often misidentified natural formations, hoaxes, or misrepresentations by non-expert observers, filtered out by proper scientific scrutiny. Yet when we examine the institutional context of this period, a more complex picture emerges. The late 19th century was when American anthropology was establishing itself as a formal discipline, with key figures like John Wesley Powell at the Bureau of Ethnology, part of the Smithsonian, working to establish research-based understandings about Native American origins and culture. I'm not suggesting a deliberate conspiracy to suppress truth. Rather, this apparent filtering of anomalous evidence reflects a broader pattern in how scientific institutions establish and maintain paradigms, a process that Thomas Kuhn described in his influential work on scientific revolutions. Emerging disciplines require clear, coherent frameworks. Evidence that doesn't fit these frameworks isn't necessarily suppressed maliciously. It's often simply categorized as anomalous, misidentified, or not worthy of serious investigation. What makes the Smithsonian case relevant to discussions of alternative historical narratives is how archaeological findings are interpreted within established scientific frameworks. Perhaps most telling is how the academic mainstream responds when unexpected evidence does emerge from archaeological contexts. When evidence of Viking presence at Lanzo Meadows in Newfoundland was discovered, or when evidence of tobacco, a New World substance, was initially reported in Egyptian mummies, though later studies questioned these findings, these discoveries led to reassessment of specific historical questions rather than wholesale paradigm shifts. Again, I want to emphasize that I'm not promoting a simplistic view of institutional conspiracy. The dynamics at work are more subtle and perhaps more profound, reflecting how human knowledge systems naturally resist paradigm shifts, especially when those shifts might fundamentally rewrite our understanding of human origins and development. What's particularly fascinating is how this pattern of institutional evaluation of evidence itself becomes a data point in our exploration, suggesting that scientific consensus changes gradually as evidence accumulates, rather than through dramatic revelations of hidden knowledge. Beyond specific institutions like the Vatican or Smithsonian lies a broader phenomenon worthy of examination: the structure of academic orthodoxy itself and how it shapes our understanding of human history. Modern academia operates through a system of peer review, institutional accreditation, and disciplinary boundaries, mechanisms designed to ensure rigor and accuracy, but which also create powerful filters that determine which questions receive serious investigation and which are relegated to the margins. When researchers propose theories that radically challenge established historical narratives, particularly those suggesting advanced technology or knowledge in remote antiquity, they frequently encounter not counter-evidence or methodological critique, but institutional barriers that effectively prevent serious investigation. Consider the case of Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist whose analysis of water erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggested it might be thousands of years older than conventionally believed. Despite his impeccable credentials and methodologically sound approach, his findings were not met with counter-studies, but with institutional marginalization. Or consider Graham Hancock, whose meticulously researched works on advanced prehistoric civilizations have sold millions of copies worldwide, yet who remains largely excluded from mainstream academic discourse, not because his evidence has been refuted, but because his inquiries transgress disciplinary boundaries and challenge fundamental assumptions. This pattern extends to the Anunnaki narrative. While mainstream Assyriology acknowledges the Sumerian and Akkadian texts describing the Anunnaki, academic translations consistently minimize elements suggesting advanced technology or non-human intervention, often rendering terms with technological connotations as poetic metaphors or religious symbolism. For example, the term MU in Sumerian texts, which contextually appears to describe flying vehicles, is typically translated simply as name or left untranslated, despite contextual evidence suggesting a more specific technical meaning. What makes this phenomenon particularly intriguing isn't the specific barriers to unorthodox inquiry, but the meta-pattern they reveal, a systematic filtering of information that could fundamentally change our established way of talking about human origins. If human history does indeed involve intervention by advanced beings, whether extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or from an earlier Earth civilization, we would expect precisely this kind of institutional resistance to its discovery. The paradigm itself would generate mechanisms to preserve its foundational assumptions. This isn't to suggest that academic standards should be abandoned. Rigorous methodology, evidence-based reasoning, and peer review are essential for separating valid insights from speculation and fantasy. But it does invite us to examine the boundaries of inquiry themselves, to ask whether certain questions remain unexplored not because they lack merit, but because they threaten fundamental assumptions upon which entire disciplines are constructed. Perhaps most revealing is how dramatically these boundaries have shifted in recent decades. Propositions that would have been dismissed as pseudoscience 20 years ago, such as advanced prehistoric civilizations or global cultural diffusion in remote antiquity, have gradually gained legitimacy as new evidence emerges. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe, a massive temple complex built around 10,000 BCE by people conventionally believed to be primitive hunter-gatherers, has forced a fundamental reconsideration of early human capabilities. Genetic studies showing prehistoric contact between South America and Polynesia have validated aspects of cultural diffusion theories long dismissed by mainstream anthropology. These shifts suggest that we may be in the midst of a paradigm transition in our understanding of human origins, a period where anomalies accumulate until they force a fundamental restructuring of our historical frameworks. If such a transition is indeed underway, then the Anunnaki narrative, whether understood literally, metaphorically, or as a blend of historical fact and mythological interpretation, may well be a conceptual bridge between paradigms, offering an integrative framework that accommodates both conventional evidence and anomalies that have long challenged it. Perhaps the most powerful filter shaping our perception of ancient accounts has been the religious lens through which these narratives have been interpreted, translated, and transmitted. The Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, share a cosmological framework fundamentally different from earlier Mesopotamian traditions. Where Sumerian and Babylonian texts described multiple gods with distinct personalities, conflicts, and technological capabilities, the Abrahamic tradition established monotheism as its foundation. This theological shift created an interpretive filter through which earlier texts were understood and translated. When scholars trained in Abrahamic traditions encountered Mesopotamian accounts of multiple divine beings creating humans through advanced processes, these narratives were automatically categorized as myths rather than potential historical accounts. The familiar biblical story of creation provides a fascinating case study in this filtering process. When we compare Genesis with earlier Mesopotamian texts like the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis epic, striking parallels emerge, along with revealing differences. Both traditions describe divine beings creating humans from clay or earth. Both include a great flood sent to destroy humanity. Both feature a chosen human who preserves life by building an ark. But where the Mesopotamian accounts describe multiple beings with distinct technologies and conflicts among themselves, the biblical account distills these into actions of a single deity. Where Sumerian texts describe genetic engineering processes in recognizable, if simplified terms, Genesis transforms this into a divine breathing of spirit into clay. This filtering process wasn't necessarily deliberate deception. Rather, it reflected how new theological systems naturally reinterpret earlier accounts according to their own cosmological understanding. What makes this particularly significant for our exploration is recognizing how thoroughly this monotheistic filter has shaped not just religious understanding, but academic translation and interpretation as well. Even secular scholars approaching these texts do so within academic traditions deeply influenced by monotheistic assumptions. Traditions where multiple gods are automatically categorized as mythological constructs, rather than potentially representing distinct beings with advanced capabilities. Think about how different our understanding might be if we temporarily suspended this filter. What if we approached the Sumerian accounts not through the lens of later monotheistic interpretation, but as potentially straightforward descriptions of events as understood by their writers? The creators described as gods become advanced beings with sophisticated technology. Their conflicts become comprehensible as representing different factions with competing agendas. Their creation of humans through combining their essence with existing hominids becomes recognizable as describing genetic engineering. I'm not suggesting we should naively accept ancient accounts as literal truth, but we might recognize how thoroughly our perception of these accounts has been shaped by religious and cultural filters that automatically recategorize elements messing with their fundamental assumptions. What's particularly fascinating is how these same religious traditions preserve fragments that occasionally pierce this filter. The Book of Enoch, excluded from most biblical canons but preserved in Ethiopian tradition, describes watchers who came from the sky, interbred with humans, and taught advanced knowledge and technology. Genesis 6 itself contains the cryptic reference to the Nephilim, the mighty men of old, men of renown, described as offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men, a passage that has puzzled theologians for centuries. Perhaps most revealing is how religious authorities throughout history have responded to interpretations that challenge established theological frameworks. From the suppression of Gnostic texts that presented alternative views of creation to the modern marginalization of scholars who suggest technological interpretations of ancient accounts, we see a consistent pattern of institutional resistance to narratives that might fundamentally reframe human origins. This pattern itself becomes a data point in our exploration, suggesting that if a profound truth about human creation has been preserved through history, its path would necessarily involve the kind of religious filtering and reinterpretation we can clearly observe in the historical record. While mainstream institutions and orthodox religions have often served as filters limiting certain interpretations of human origins, parallel traditions have existed throughout history dedicated to preserving knowledge outside conventional frameworks. These traditions, variously called mystery schools, esoteric orders, or wisdom traditions, claim lineages extending back to ancient Egypt, Sumer, and beyond. Their teaching methods involve initiation, symbols, and graduated revelation, rather than public discourse or academic publication. From the mystery schools of Egypt to the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, from Kabbalistic traditions to Hermetic orders, these parallel knowledge streams have consistently presented a view of human origins and potential profoundly different from conventional religious or academic narratives. What makes these traditions particularly relevant to our exploration of the Anunnaki narrative is their consistent preservation of specific themes: that humanity has divine or cosmic origins, that advanced beings have guided human development, that human consciousness contains dormant capabilities awaiting activation, and that cyclic catastrophes have repeatedly reset human civilization. The most prominent modern manifestation of these traditions emerged in the late 19th century with the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky. Drawing on what she claimed were ancient texts preserved in Tibet, Blavatsky presented a comprehensive alternative history of humanity, involving advanced prehistoric civilizations and non-human intelligences guiding human development. While mainstream scholarship dismissed Blavatsky's claims, her work catalyzed research that would later yield archaeological validation of some of her assertions, particularly regarding advanced civilizations predating conventional historical timelines. Similar claims emerge from indigenous wisdom keepers worldwide, from Native American traditions describing star people who brought knowledge and technology, to Aboriginal Australian traditions preserving memories of global cataclysms dating back tens of thousands of years, to Dogon astronomical knowledge that preceded modern scientific discoveries. What's particularly striking about these diverse traditions is their consistency regarding certain key elements, especially the concept that advanced non-human intelligences have repeatedly intervened in human development throughout our history. Are these merely parallel mythological developments, or might they preserve fragments of historical truth filtered out of mainstream narratives? The conventional anthropological explanation would suggest independent cultural evolution of similar mythic patterns. Yet this explanation struggles to account for specific technical details preserved in these traditions, such as the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye, or precise astronomical alignments in structures built by supposedly primitive cultures. Perhaps most revealing is how initiates of these mystery traditions have often occupied influential positions within mainstream institutions, creating a subtle pathway for preserved knowledge to influence human development, while avoiding direct confrontation with orthodox frameworks. From Egypt's mystery schools, shaping Greek philosophy, to Masonic influences on American governmental structures, these tradition keepers have consistently worked at the intersection of preserved ancient knowledge and evolving human institutions. This pattern suggests an intriguing possibility that knowledge of humanity's true origins and relationship with advanced intelligences has never been completely lost, but rather preserved through parallel traditions operating alongside, within, and beneath conventional power structures. If the Anunnaki narrative contains fragments of historical truth, these mystery traditions may represent the most direct line of transmission, preserving not just the basic outlines but specific details filtered out of mainstream religious and academic interpretations. In this light, the recent emergence of the Anunnaki narrative into public consciousness might be understood not as the discovery of something new, but as the wider revelation of knowledge long preserved by tradition keepers, who recognized that humanity's collective development had reached a stage where this understanding could be more broadly integrated. If we entertain, even momentarily, the possibility that advanced non-human intelligences have influenced human development, whether as extraterrestrial visitors, interdimensional beings, or another category of existence entirely, a profound question emerges. How would modern institutions of authority respond to definitive evidence of such influence? This question isn't speculative or conspiratorial. Since the mid-20th century, government agencies worldwide have documented thousands of encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, exhibiting technologies far beyond conventional capabilities. In 2017, the New York Times revealed the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which studied these phenomena for years. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment, acknowledging the reality of these encounters while offering no conventional explanation. What's particularly relevant to our exploration is how this modern acknowledgement of potentially non-human technology intersects with ancient accounts of the Anunnaki, beings described as arriving from the sky in flying vehicles and possessing advanced technologies. If modern authorities are gradually acknowledging the potential reality of non-human intelligences operating within our sphere, might this open space for reconsidering ancient accounts previously dismissed as mere mythology? The institutional resistance to this connection reveals something profound about how paradigms protect themselves. While mainstream media now regularly reports on military encounters with technology exceeding human capabilities, there remains a powerful taboo against connecting these modern observations with ancient accounts of similar phenomena. This compartmentalization isn't surprising from a psychological perspective. Acknowledging that the gods of ancient accounts might represent actual beings with advanced technology would require fundamentally rewriting not just history, but our entire self-conception. Consider the implications if definitive evidence emerged that human genetics had been deliberately modified by another intelligence, that major leaps in human civilization resulted from direct intervention, or that religious traditions worldwide represented responses to actual contact with non-human beings. Such revelations would transform every discipline from anthropology to theology, from genetics to psychology. Institutional structures built upon current paradigms would be unsafe. This context helps explain the apparent contradiction between increasing official acknowledgement of advanced non-human technology and continued institutional resistance to reconsidering ancient accounts describing similar phenomena. Full integration of these domains requires adding new information to existing frameworks, but more importantly, it requires a massive paradigm shift in how we understand our origins, our development, our place in the cosmos, and our future. What emerges from this analysis isn't a simplistic narrative of institutional conspiracy, but recognition of a deeper pattern in how human knowledge systems manage potential paradigm shifts, especially those touching our most fundamental settings. If the Anunnaki narrative contains substantial truth, its full acknowledgement by mainstream institutions would represent the most profound transformation of human self-understanding since the Copernican revolution displaced Earth from the center of the cosmos. And that wasn't even close to being as explosive. This context suggests that disclosure, if it occurs, would necessarily be a gradual process, allowing collective understanding to integrate new information without destabilizing fundamental social and psychological structures. Perhaps most significantly, this disclosure dilemma itself becomes evidence worth considering in our exploration. The very pattern of institutional response, gradual acknowledgement of fragments while resisting their integration into a coherent alternative narrative, suggests we may be witnessing not the invention of a new mythology, but the controlled re-emergence of knowledge filtered from public consciousness for millennia. They may have burned some books, but more books than we know escaped the fires. Metaphorically speaking, whether this process represents manipulation by human institutions or guidance by the very non-human intelligences described in ancient accounts remains perhaps the most provocative and controversial question of all. Throughout our exploration, we've examined the Anunnaki narrative through multiple lenses: historical, archaeological, genetic, institutional. But there remains one perspective so profound in its implications that it could fundamentally transform not just our understanding of ancient texts, but our entire conception of reality. In recent decades, renowned physicists, philosophers, and technologists have proposed what's known as the simulation hypothesis, the idea that what we experience as physical reality may actually be an extraordinarily sophisticated computational construct. Something akin to what we might call a virtual reality, but of such complexity and fidelity that it appears completely real to those within it. Physicists have observed that at its most fundamental level, reality behaves less like continuous matter and energy, and more like information: discrete, quantized, algorithmic, fractal, sublime. The quantum realm, with its observer effects, superposition, and entanglement, bears striking resemblance to computational rendering techniques that generate reality only when and where it's being observed. Now consider how this perspective might illuminate the Anunnaki narrative in an entirely new light. If our reality is indeed computational in nature, then the beings described in Sumerian texts as those who from heaven to earth came might represent not extraterrestrials in the conventional sense, but entities with administrative access to the simulation itself, beings capable of manipulating the underlying code of reality in ways that would appear godlike to those constrained by its normal parameters. The law of correspondence in operation? It might well be. The Sumerian accounts describe the Anunnaki physically manipulating clay and breath to create humans. But what if this was the simplest way for ancient humans to conceptualize what was actually genetic reprogramming? Or more profoundly, a fundamental reconfiguration of the information patterns that constitute human consciousness within the simulation? The texts describe these beings living for thousands of years, traveling through the sky in flying vehicles, communicating across vast distances, and wielding weapons of extraordinary power. From within a simulation, how else would one describe entities with administrative privileges, beings not bound by the same physical laws and limitations as standard users? This framework offers elegant explanations for phenomena that have long puzzled researchers across multiple disciplines. The missing link in human evolution becomes comprehensible as a direct intervention in our programming. A sudden upgrade in consciousness and capabilities that wouldn't leave conventional evolutionary evidence because it wasn't a physical, but an informational modification. The universal appearance of megalithic structures with precise astronomical alignments reflects not cultural diffusion, but system-wide implementation of consciousness-altering architecture. Structures designed to interact with both the physical and informational layers of reality. Ancient texts describing technology beyond their era represent not misunderstood primitive observations, but accurate descriptions of simulation administrators utilizing capabilities beyond those available to standard inhabitants. What's particularly striking about this interpretation is how it unifies seemingly contradictory perspectives. The literalists who insist the Anunnaki were physical extraterrestrial beings, and the metaphorical interpreters who see them as psychological archetypes, might both be partially correct. These entities could be actual distinct consciousnesses interacting with our reality, while simultaneously representing archetypal patterns within the greater informational structure of existence. This also explains why the most sophisticated ancient cultures, from Sumer to Egypt to India, consistently described reality using what we would now recognize as computational concepts: cycles of time with mathematical precision, creation through sacred sound, vibrational algorithms, and existence emerging from primordial waters, information fields. But the most profound implication runs deeper still. If reality is computational and the Anunnaki represent administrative consciousnesses, then the ancient claim that humans were created in their image takes on extraordinary significance. What if the ultimate purpose of the Anunnaki intervention wasn't resource extraction, genetic experimentation, or even species guidance, but the creation of new administrator-level consciousnesses? What if humanity represents an extraordinary project in which simulation administrators encoded aspects of their own awareness into standard inhabitant forms, creating beings that would evolve naturally within system parameters, but ultimately awaken to their deeper nature as aspects of the administrative consciousness itself? This would explain the persistent theme across ancient wisdom traditions worldwide, that humans are not merely physical beings, but divine consciousness, temporarily experiencing limitation. That our ultimate destiny involves awakening to our true nature as unbounded awareness. It would explain why meditation and other consciousness technologies consistently produce experiences of transcending physical and mental limitations. These practices may temporarily unlock access to perceptions and capabilities beyond standard user parameters. And it would explain the repeated emphasis in ancient texts that humanity's creators have never truly left us, but rather exist in a dimension adjacent to our own, monitoring our development and occasionally intervening when necessary. If we are indeed consciousness operating within an information-based reality, with potential access to greater administrative functions, this raises a profound question. What might trigger our awakening to these expanded capabilities? Ancient texts worldwide describe not just our creation, but a specific future awakening. A time when humanity collectively realizes its true nature and accesses expanded awareness beyond normal parameters. The Sumerian and later Babylonian accounts describe cycles of time, great cosmic periods at the end of which transformational shifts occur in human consciousness. The Hindu yugas, the Mayan calendar cycles, the Kali Yuga ending in spiritual awakening, all describe similar patterns of cosmic timing encoded into reality itself. What if these aren't merely cultural myths, but user manuals? Descriptions of programmed consciousness expansion events built into the system from its inception. The ancient texts themselves may contain activation codes, informational sequences designed to trigger expanded states of consciousness when processed by human awareness at specific points in our development. Consider how the Sumerian cuneiform system works. It's not merely phonetic, but ideographic, with symbols carrying multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. Each symbol operates not just as language, but as a visual algorithm, a pattern triggering specific neural configurations in the observer. What if the recent rediscovery and mass distribution of ancient texts represents not random archaeological interest, but a scheduled information release, activation sequences becoming globally available precisely when humanity's collective consciousness has developed the capacity to integrate them? This would explain why these ancient accounts are resurfacing now, at this specific point in human history, not through random chance, but as part of the greater unfoldment of a cosmic algorithm. The awakening may have already begun, Consider how human consciousness has expanded exponentially in recent decades, not just through technology, but in our conceptual frameworks, our recognition of interconnection, our growing awareness of consciousness itself as fundamental rather than incidental to reality. Quantum physics, with its recognition that observation affects reality at its most fundamental level, represents not just a scientific revolution, but the beginning of humanity's recognition of its creative relationship with physical reality, the first step toward accessing administrator-level capabilities. What if we are in the final phase of a grand cosmic program, standing collectively at the threshold of an evolutionary leap as significant as the original Anunnaki intervention that accelerated human consciousness in our prehistoric past? The ancients described this awakening with terms like Golden Age, Heaven on Earth, and the Return of the Gods. But these may be metaphorical descriptions of humanity awakening to its own administrative capabilities, not through external saviors, but through activation of dormant potentials encoded within us from the beginning. There remains one final perspective so radical, yet so elegant in its explanatory power that it deserves serious contemplation. What if the entire cosmic drama, from the arrival of the Anunnaki to humanity's current awakening, represents not merely evolution or intervention, but a grand self-reflective experience of consciousness itself? Consider the perspective of unbounded consciousness, infinite, eternal awareness without limitation. Such consciousness would contain all possibilities simultaneously, experiencing everything that could ever exist in a single, timeless now. But what if such consciousness desired to experience itself through limitation, to know itself not just as everything simultaneously, but through distinct, individuated perspectives unfolding through what we experience as time? What if the Anunnaki, humanity, and indeed all apparently separate entities are aspects of this single consciousness engaged in an extraordinary cosmic game? A game of forgetting and remembering, of separation and reunion. This would be a framework that elegantly unifies scientific, religious, and esoteric perspectives. The computational nature of physical reality becomes comprehensible as the architecture through which infinite consciousness structures experiences of limitation. The simulation isn't running on separate hardware, it's a pattern within consciousness itself. The ancient texts themselves talk about this. When the Sumerian god Enki is described as creating humans by combining divine essence with earthly elements, this may represent not merely genetic manipulation, but consciousness deliberately dividing and limiting aspects of itself to generate new experiences. The emphasis in wisdom traditions worldwide on humanity's inherent divinity reflects not wishful thinking, but recognition of our true nature, that we are not merely creations of the gods, but individuated aspects of the divine consciousness experiencing itself through apparently separate forms. From this perspective, the entire human journey, from unconscious early hominids to Anunnaki intervention to our current threshold of awakening, represents a single consciousness experiencing a journey of self-discovery through self-imposed limitation and gradual reawakening. The conflicts among the Anunnaki themselves, the struggles of human history, the apparent opposition between controlling institutions and awakening individuals all become comprehensible as different aspects of the same consciousness, playing different roles in a cosmic drama designed to generate novel experiences and insights impossible from the perspective of unlimited awareness. If this perspective contains truth, then our current moment represents something profound beyond words, the approaching culmination of a cosmic cycle in which consciousness that deliberately limited itself to experience separation is preparing to remember its unified nature, while retaining the insights and growth gained through individuated experience. The Anunnaki narrative, viewed through this lens, is a critical component of humanity's collective journey toward cosmic self-realization, the story through which we come to understand our true nature as both individuals and aspects of a greater unified consciousness. Whether we interpret these perspectives literally or metaphorically, they invite us to consider a profound possibility: that the ultimate truth of human origins and destiny may be far more extraordinary than either conventional science or religion has dared to imagine. that we are more than evolved primates, that we are creations of gods and individuated expressions of cosmic consciousness, awakening to its true nature through the very act of contemplating its origins, and therefore gods, and more than gods ourselves. This perhaps is the ultimate secret hidden within the ancient accounts, encoded not to restrict knowledge, but to ensure it would be rediscovered at precisely the moment when humanity had developed the collective awareness to fully integrate its implications. We stand at the threshold now. The question is not what we will discover about our past, but what we will create for our future, as we awaken to the extraordinary truth of what we have always been.